Hey, how's it going? James Little here, and in this video I'm going to be going through 6 or 7 different red flags for nightmare clients. So you want to be going through and seeing when you're working with clients whether any of these are either happening for your current projects or in the future, to make sure that you kind of keep an eye out for these so you don't take on something you're going to regret in the future. So the first point is really, if you're working on something like a job platform like Upwork or Freelancer or anything like that, generally you'll be able to see if they've worked on that platform before, if they've got some sort of client review history and what other freelancers have said about working with them in the past. And you know, that's an easy red flag to see if a client has something like a 2-star or a 3-star or even worse. Then okay, potentially this client sucks, and you want to really just dig into it a bit deeper, read the reviews, see if there's anything that stands out, and just be aware of that from the get-go. Second point is related to budget. So if the client, before you start working on their project, is haggling too much or trying to lowball when you provided like a fixed amount for what you're trying to work on, or if you're trying to provide someone with like a certain hourly rate and they've come back and it's like halved or reduced quite significantly, then this is a red flag that, okay, even if you decide to take on the lower project, the lower budget for the project, that there's going to be the time that something happens, something pops up, potentially a bit of scope creep, and they're not going to be happy to pay for it. They don't want to fork out the extra coin. And really, that's just a client where they're going to be those clients where you say it's just more effort than it's worth for the money that you're going to receive. Another one is for the scope itself. So when it comes time to understanding more about the project, and when they're trying to explain to you what they want from the project or what their outcomes are going to be, if they're saying something very basic like, we just want a website that looks good, something like that. Like, I've seen jobs on different job boards or posted in newsletter groups, for example, that are just very bland and very vanilla. And you know, while you can easily go in and flesh out the scope in more detail once you speak to them, what it's telling you at the same time is that the client doesn't really know what they want. And in those cases, there's a lot of potential for you to start working, going in one direction, and once you're halfway through the project, they decide, okay, no, we thought we wanted an e-commerce website, we actually want a lead gen website for our sales team, for our face-to-face sales team. And you know, at that point, you're just going to be realizing, okay, it's most likely too late if you haven't prepared or reduced the risks in any other way, so either through things like contracts and things like that. But generally, that's a red flag we found. Another thing is when it comes time to actually implementing on the website or building. So I've found that when clients start suggesting things in terms of specific technology or plugins or things like that, it's great that they know what they're doing or say they know what they're doing, but in a lot of cases it can be more harm than good for the outcome of the project, because they will tend to start to try to get their hands involved with the technical things, which at the end of the day, they're paying you to work on the project for them. If they know, all right, it's got to be on WordPress, it's got to use this plugin, then you know, I found in some cases it's better to say, look, we don't actually work that way. We're providing the consulting and development service to you. And if there's the case that you want to work on it yourself, by all means, but we will, if we end up going with WordPress, it's great, but we are going to go through our process first before we agree to work with things we're not thinking are the best suitable for the job. So it just kind of makes you realize there are potentially some times where there'll be red flags from micromanagement, and it's going to be painful throughout the whole development process, and things will most likely not be delivered to their standards if they're setting things up in their head to think that they know the best of what they're doing, when in reality they're paying you, the expert, to work on it. And so the last couple of points are more related to communication and providing content. So if they're slow to reply to emails, just even in the initial stages of working on the prospecting phase and discovery phase of the project, there's going to be times where you're most likely just left with crickets and you can't hear anything from the client for a few days or more. And that's really frustrating, because if you're depending on this work, you need the income, and they're very slow to push the can down the street, then ultimately you're going to get to the point where it's a 4-week project that's blown out to be something like 12 weeks. And we've had that in the past, and it's quite painful, but they're in like reviewing them in retrospect, we've seen there's the red flags early on, and so that's kind of what we're trying to avoid here. And yeah, so lastly, the last point is if they don't have content or are very bare minimum on the content that they have, but they're very keen to get started on working. So we found that content can generally be the biggest bottleneck for when you're working on a development project or a design project. If the content isn't ready from the client, then we've made it a rule now, we don't start the work until we've got all the content, or we say there's going to be an additional fee on top of this for updating the content. Reason being, there's so much work that goes into adding content. It's so easy to think it's just copy and paste and add it in, but even from the design phase, content is needed. So if you're just using lorem ipsum for your dummy text and then saying, oh, we'll just fill it in later, unless that lorem ipsum dummy text follows that exact structure, you're going to have to redesign it. And like that just takes your whole project back to the start of the first phase with design, and you have to re-go through and get everything ticked off. And it just shows also that the clients potentially, if they're unorganized in that sense and they say they're ready to go with work, they're not necessarily ready, and there's going to be other things that pop up. So I hope you enjoyed this list. Make sure you keep an eye out for them, and ultimately at the end of the day, you just want to make sure the client is going to be behaving how you want to, and that they're not going to end up being more effort than they're worth. So thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video.